Growing up, we all had that one friend that you thought was rich, not because they actually were, but because they had one or two sizzle features around the house that made it seem that way. My first experience with this was my buddy Danny, who had a second fridge in his garage that was always fully stocked with Gatorades, sodas, chocolate milk, juices, water, anything you could imagine. It was a 7-Eleven, but without the rotisserie meat and tobacco smell. It was incredible. But what does that have to do with a kitchen remodel? Well, fast forward a couple years in my childhood, and I was visiting my cousins in New Orleans. It was my first time in their new house, and I walked into the kitchen, and there it was, Danny's fridge. Not actually, but there were two sizzle features in that kitchen that brought back all the same feelings of luxury and old money, and I knew that one day, when I had my own credit card, that I would include these two features in my kitchen and make it my own reality, and today's that day. But first, we gotta prime this plywood subfloor and apply an uncoupling membrane. And I know you're wondering what those two sizzle features were, and we're getting there, okay? You're just getting ahead of yourself.
Playoffs?
This is my first time using a peel and stick uncoupling membrane, and peel and stick is a close cousin to the scratch and sniff, but they are not the same. If you end up scratching and sniffing a peel and stick, you're gonna look like an absolute fool, and it's hard to recover from that depending on the company. On the plus side, this uncoupling membrane is super easy to cut, but a lot of you guys were ripping on the peel and stick in the comments of a previous video saying that peel and stick is trash, so I'm hoping that those people were haters and not just correct. Now, for those of you who have been in construction for some time, you probably know exactly what this is. This is a heated cable flooring system, and you're probably thinking that you have just spotted the first sizzle feature I was referring to before. But if you've ever been to Louisiana, you were probably sweating the entire time. So having a heated tile flooring system in a Louisiana kitchen is probably about as psychopathic as you can get. And speaking of Louisiana kitchen, I want to talk about Popeyes and Chipotle, Taco Bell, McDonald's, Wendy's, all of them. I ate so much fast food during this kitchen remodel, and I don't really know of a way around it. I guess some people will set up like a camping cook stove in their dining room and try to cook some bare bones meals during the kitchen renovation process, and that's definitely a more economical way to do it if you got a family, but I honestly ate Chipotle probably 7 days a week. It was bad. And I have a stone to grind with Chipotle, but we'll talk about that more a little later. When it comes to tile, you have a couple ways to cut it. You can use an angle grinder with a cutting wheel. You can use a dry cutter, which is what I use for the majority of the cuts in this kitchen. And you can also use a wet tile saw, but the cuts in this kitchen were so simple that I didn't need one. And depending on what stage of life you're in, you probably have either a roommate or a least favorite child. And what you're gonna do is take their toothbrush and use it to clean out all of the thin set from between the tiles. You don't want that to harden in between your tiles and dry because it's gonna be a pain in the butt to scrape out later. And I have dedicated instructional videos on how to do every single part of this kitchen remodel, so I'll link them all down below if you want to learn. This is going to be more entertainment, I guess. And this is probably the most fun part of the tile process, is removing those leveling clips, followed immediately by the worst thing known to man, which is scraping dried thin set from between the tiles. And lastly, we have to grout and seal the tiles. And even though I barely use the heated flooring system, it does work pretty dang well. It can raise the floor like 20 degrees in about 15 minutes. Now, I considered moving the entire kitchen to the opposite wall so you could look out the window when you're using the sink, but that would have required me to move all the utilities, and I just got a little bit lazy. I also really wanted to install a pot filler, but it was going to be more trouble than it was worth to get a water line over there. When it comes to the cabinets, I modeled everything in SketchUp so I knew exactly what I needed, and now I just gotta hang them up. The first thing we want to do is find all the wall studs because we're going to be attaching the cabinets to the wall studs and not the drywall, obviously. But you have free will. If you want to attach the cabinets just to the drywall, feel free. I just wouldn't store too many cans of soup in them. Upper cabinets are typically mounted around 84 inches above the floor, so I'm using a laser level and a chalk line to mark my reference line across the top. At the end of the day, hanging cabinets is basically attaching a bunch of boxes to your wall. You're going to position it where you want it, make sure it's level, screw it through the box into the studs, and that's upper cabinets. Obviously, that's a gross oversimplification, which is why I have a video showing the whole process, but on paper, the process really isn't all that difficult. This does assume that your walls are relatively plumb. If your walls are completely out of whack and you have to do a bunch of shimming and, jerry-rigging to get them to sit right, that's gonna slow you down and that's gonna be annoying, but if your walls are relatively flat, you can usually fly through some upper cabinets pretty quick. I think base cabinets are a bit easier to install than the upper cabinets for the obvious reason, you're not having to hold them up, they just rest on the ground. Secure the base cabinets to the studs, just like the upper cabinets. And for this base cabinet, I had to cut a hole so that I could plug in an appliance, and this is going to be important later on. The base cabinet for the sink is obviously the hardest one to install because you have to cut the penetrations for the hot and cold water supplies and the drain. Now, either I can't do basic math or I don't give myself enough room for error when picking the size of the hole to cut, because I feel like this process never goes smoothly. I feel like there's always an adjustment I have to make in order to get that cabinet to actually fit over the plumbing. When it comes to the base cabinets, you really want to make sure they're perfectly level and plumb, because if they're not, you're going to have issues when you install the counters. And make sure that you're careful not to damage any of the cabinet doors during the installation. And this right here is a fridge panel I'm installing because I feel like when you build around the fridge, it looks so much more professional, so that's what we're doing. And this last cabinet here is going to be a small little coffee bar, so I had to customize an upper cabinet and attach my own toe kick to the bottom, but I think it's going to work. And thankfully, we're at the last step in the cabinet installation process, which is to install the hardware and attach any of the toe kicks or trim pieces to the side of the cabinets. The most common question I get on this kitchen remodel is how much did everything cost? Which is why I put together this blog article that goes through all the costs in detail. That link will take you to this blog article, and my goal for 2026 is to increase the traffic to my site, so if everybody watching could just click it, even if you don't care about the cost or want to read the article, it would mean the world to me. When it comes to countertops, any material that you can install yourself, like laminate or concrete, isn't going to add any value to your home. Okay, my counters get installed tomorrow, so I got a lot of work to do. And you don't have to do this before the counters arrive, but I highly recommend that you plumb your sink and you run the electrical for any kind of disposals before the counters arrive, because that way you can access everything from up top as opposed to just through the side. So a little pro tip, if you do plan far enough in advance. One lesson learned, don't mount anything so high that the sink, once you install it, is gonna hit it. Ask me how I know. And obviously we can't install the disposal or the P-trap until the sink arrives, so I'm just gonna stub this out for now. Now, I know some of you are going to be like, how do you claim to do a kitchen remodel all by yourself if you're out here outsourcing the counters? And what do you guys want me to do? I'm not going to install laminate, and I don't think there's like a legit material that you can install by yourself. So I'm going to go on record here saying it's fair to call your kitchen remodel 100% DIY, even if you outsource the counters, because there's really no way around it. But this is a very exciting point in the video because I'm about to reveal the first sizzle feature I alluded to earlier. I speak, of course, of Waterfall countertops. In my opinion, there are few things classier than a perfectly mitered 45-degree countertop edge that transitions seamlessly from the horizontal countertop to the vertical waterfall piece of the counter that covers up the side of your cabinet. I think it looks fantastic, and when I was 12 years old seeing it for the first time in my cousin's kitchen, I knew that I was going to try to incorporate that into my kitchen the first chance I got. Now, at this point in the kitchen remodel process, I have been without a kitchen for like 40 days. And as I said earlier, I have been eating a lot of fast food, with Chipotle being my go-to. Now, here's my stone to grind with Chipotle. Back in the day, 2010, Chipotle was the mecca. It was the gold standard. You'd order a burrito and it would be the size of a football. Life was good. Fast forward to today, and I feel like you have to use psychological manipulation when you order just to get a burrito the size of a baseball. Maybe this is just my personal experience at my local Chipotle, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Also, let me know what you guys did for food during your kitchen renovations. If you ate out a lot, let me know where you would go mostly. And if you tried to cook in your dining room, let me know how that went. And my home is on well water, and there is enough iron in the water to make me FEARFUL. And if you got that joke, I am so sorry. So I installed this water filter underneath my sink. All right, we are finally getting to the home stretch of this kitchen remodel, and there's just a few things left to do. First, I trimmed around this bay window, which was no big deal, and then I installed crown molding around the cabinets. This was my first time dealing with crown molding, and there's a bit of a learning curve in terms of the spring angle you got to set everything to on your miter saw, but after a little bit of trial and error, I figured it out. And your cabinet supplier will usually give you a touch-up pencil like this. As long as you planned ahead, installing the appliances is super simple, but there's one appliance that we have to talk about because it's the second sizzle feature, the drawer microwave. Ever since I saw one of these drawer microwaves in my cousin's kitchen so long ago, I've always associated them with luxury, even though that's crazy, but I wanted to include one in this kitchen remodel. And now, with all the appliances installed, this project is complete. Now here's a quick reminder look at where this project started. And here is a look at the final result. So here's how the kitchen remodel turned out. Hopefully you guys think it turned out okay. If you're curious how much I spent to make this possible, check out the blog article, which is the first link down in the video description. That goes through all the costs in detail. And if you want to learn how to remodel a kitchen like this yourself, I have videos that show you every aspect of the remodel, from the flooring to the cabinets, everything, so that you can save $30,000 on labor by doing it yourself. If you got some value from the video, I really would appreciate if you could drop a like down below, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you get notified next time I upload, and I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks, and God bless. Oh, and if you have any questions about any part of the remodel, drop them down in the comments, and I'll be sure to answer as many of those as I possibly can. Thanks again.